So thanks for coming. This is the Designing Apps and Games for Kids the Right Way panel. So for the next hour, we're going to discuss best pitfalls that real developers in the kids app space have experienced. And by the end of this, you'll know how to develop an entertaining and engaging app and game for kids, not just another distraction. So let's get started by introducing the panelists. Strangely enough, I listed the panelists in my notes the same way that you guys sat down, which is very interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so Paul Armstrong is the co-founder and chief creative officer at ChoreMonster, which is a venture-backed startup in Cincinnati that makes chores fun by engaging and rewarding kids. Paul's an avid photographer, featured on the Flickr blog and Good Morning America, and enjoys frequently downloading new versions of Photoshop. Carly Gloge is the co-founder and CEO at SmartToy, formerly Ubooly, the venture-backed startup that just moved from Boulder, Colorado to Los Angeles, so any local LA people, she's local now. Their first product, Ubooly, was a combination stuffed animal and interactive app for kids, recently featured by Apple. And one of Carly's recent accomplishments was being interviewed by TechCrunch while being in a race car. And she has successfully finished the interview without throwing up.
Very close. Very close.
And then finally, Jim Nichols is the co-founder at THUP Games, the makers of apps like Monkey Preschool Lunchbox and Monkey Math School Sunshine, all of which are regularly rating in the top charts in the iOS Kids category. And I've never said monkey and math or in school more than in an intro, so
Right.
that happened.
It's a lot of words.
It is a lot of words. So join me in welcoming the panelists. And if you're wondering who I am, I'm the lucky moderator. My name's Alex. I'm the head of marketing at ChoreMonster. All right, let's roll right into the first question. So panelists, what do you believe parents look for when they're searching for apps for their children?
I think they first look for something they recognize.
Okay.
So brand recognition comes top of mind. A parent will look for something, and if they recognize Elmo or a Disney character, that's first thing. At least that's what I think.
So step one, put Disney characters in your apps.
Yeah, no, that's not. I think it's just for safety of recognition. That's not a chance.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think that was happening so much a few years ago, but
No.
now it's a big one. Obviously, reviews are a huge component, right? Just like an Amazon shopper, for sure. And any red
Or
flags.
even word of mouth, probably.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think that a lot of times when parents come to the store, they have an idea of what they're looking for, but they're actually looking for something that maybe they've seen a kid play or heard about from another parent. So, and I think they're also looking for sometimes something in contrast to Disney. Like there might be a lot of parents that are looking for something that isn't necessarily Mickey Mouse or Dora or Doc McStuffins, even though they might have the intention of buying that or satisfying their kid. They really do. They're kind of discerning in a sense. I think that, and then they'll maybe do that next step and go look at reviews.
Yeah. As a parent, I always just look at the featured games.
Yeah, featured.
Yeah.
That actually does help.
Yeah.
So to contrast that question, then, what do they avoid?
In-app purchases. I mean,
Yeah, very true.
we've done some surveys with folks that were looking at our App Store listing. We do have in-app purchases right now. And there's some that will be hesitant to download if they see it.
Yeah, I think that if sort of shelf appeal is a big thing, and if they just sort of, once they get past just the icon or looking at the screenshots and they kind of get a sense of what the app's about, I think anything that sets off alarms that there might be some sort of hidden payment or this isn't the full offering and there's anything that's sort of cloudy, they'll definitely avoid that.
Even if it's not free sometimes or have a free version, they won't download it.
Right. And I think still, too, education is a big part of a lot of parents' first initial, especially in the younger side, they're looking for something that might be more educational, although I think that's really...
That's a cloudy area.
Yeah, and that's lightened up a lot also.
Yeah, it's kind of become a check-the-box thing rather than actually legitimate. It's more marketing, where a lot of apps I see now, they claim that they're educational. I'm like, okay. I mean, like Club Penguin, for example, it's listed as an educational app. And like, that's a bullet point. And I see that there's probably some values, but like that's probably not the first thing that comes to mind for me.
No.
Yeah, I think that also parents want to avoid something that they feel their kid won't like. So there needs to be something in there that's age appropriate for how you're marketing it, or that it sort of resonates with what's happening maybe with the other types of offering in the app stores. Like, does this fit sort of the model of what they expect from an app?
So we've all made mistakes designing our apps. Have you guys ever made mistakes designing your apps? Okay. What's one that really took you guys by surprise?
Well, I've made a lot of them, I suppose, but our first app came out quite a while ago, Monkey Preschool Lunchbox, and that was sort of a surprise hit, really, for us. We had done a lot of other work, and the App Store was new, and so we had to decide, well, how do we follow it up? What's our next app going to be? So, excuse me. So we created this app that we thought wouldn't compete with it because we didn't want to step on something that was doing well, but at the same time, we kind of made the mistake of ignoring what was working. So we followed it up with a dress-up app that was called When I Grow Up, and it was really cute and it had a lot of fun things for kids to do. But we'll realize when we put it out there, it initially did well, but the parents didn't like it in general because it was sort of a violation of the contract we had started with Lunchbox. It wasn't educational. They didn't feel as great about it when their kid was playing it. So it was sort of like we'd sort of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit with a follow-up. However, over the years, we've come to find out that another part of it is that the kids really actually liked it a lot, but parents didn't necessarily, when they had the choice between a more overtly educational app versus one that was just more play, they wanted it to be more educational.
What made you decide to come out with that as your second app?
Well, it was really a lot about trying to think about, one, expanding the brand a little bit, because education has its own constraints from a development perspective. And then also, we just sort of thought it would be a sort of a fun broadening of the brand, you know. And also, we didn't think it would be that big of a deal. It was 99 cents, but it meant a lot. And so, in some ways, it was great because it reinforced that what we had done initially was right. But at the same time, they kind of showed us that you have to be careful not to necessarily move too quickly away from something that's working.
Anyone else want to share their mistakes?
Yeah.
Air it out.
I think the one that was more a long-term mistake was the first 6 months of Ubooly. We were not regularly watching kids play. So we'd watch them maybe once a month, and we kind of thought we'd learn what we needed to learn and then come back to it. Now we're at a point where it's every 2 weeks we have the entire team watch, and that was another thing. We used to have it where maybe a couple people would sit and watch the sessions, and then we relay a lot to the developers. And we found that they would loosely interpret our feedback when the entire team started watching the actual footage. Whether it was something that we recorded ourselves or usertesting.com, we found that they took it to heart when they saw something not work. Yeah. It would kind of be something that was on the backlog for a while, and then maybe they'd go fix it. But once they actually saw a kid having a kind of a bad experience with the app, that was something that was just made our whole path a lot clearer on how to, what needed to be changed in each app update.
Just out of curiosity, how many of you are in the process of building a kids app or have already built a kids app?
Oh,
and then how many of you are actually watching kids play your app or game? Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah. You're not at that point yet? You'll get there.
I could share a lot of mistakes, but one is when we were starting out, and everyone has to do this, was deciding on how we were going to make money. And initially we thought we didn't like the idea of charging for a download because it's just a one-time purchase. It's not consistent. The only way to become consistent is to always release something new. And we knew we didn't have the manpower to do that, so we thought we would do then a subscription-based. And our biggest mistake was overvaluing what we thought people would be interested in paying. We thought, our app is helping their family be better. Surely they will find the value in that and pay for it. And we were dead wrong. We took a lot of gambles thinking what to charge and what to, when you do that, you kind of put a handcuff on certain things that you won't be able to do if you're a member or if you are. And we took the gamble mistakenly on handcuffing the kids side, which was a mistake. So kids wouldn't have a full experience if they didn't have a subscription. And we thought that would be, a good way because the kid would want to ask their parent to do it. It just turned out that the parents got annoyed that we did not give their kids a good experience. And it was a gamble we took, and we're like, well, that was bad. So now we're completely free, but everyone's going to have to decide on, if you're going to be free, if you're not going to be free, if you're going to charge, how are you going to keep making that money? If you're going to go subscription, what is it that someone's going to find valuable to pay for, and we took assumptions without doing a lot of research. Again, we were just 4 people or 3 people, and just went on small surveys that weren't well-rounded enough. So,
I think that kind of points out the App Store in particular too, is that you don't really get an opportunity to vet mistakes. You have to just put it into that store. There's no way you can do testing and you can make sure that there's no problems with the play or UI and UX. But as far as how it's going to perform in a space that has such a diversity of options and behaviors, and especially when you're going through the parents to the kid, or in your case when you have something that's both, you really can't know until you do it. You can make a guess, you can look at what's out there, but
yeah, you have to do something.
Yeah, you have to put it out there.
And people say different stuff in surveys than they will actually do.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard so many app developers say, oh, well, we did a survey and people said they'd spend $6 a month on this, and like that. I rarely ever see that play out truly. So I think that if you really want to have an honest perspective, like look at the landscape of what people are willing to pay out there. Unfortunately, for kids apps,
people like not to pay for anything.
They don't like to pay very much. I mean, we've been chatting with some of the really large developers right now, and it is tough. Like, there's a lot of apps that people think, oh, those are kids that are paying in-app purchases. It's actually like women that are in their 20s that are actually giving the bulk of their spend. I won't name the studios, but I've talked to a few where I was like, oh, I thought you guys were like a kids app, like kind of older kids, and it turns out that their main revenue generators are actually an older audience, right? So it's a little challenging to have any kind of revenue model right now, and getting really creative like you guys did.
Yeah, and Ubooly, you guys have in-app purchases, right?
We do, yeah.
And then Monkey Preschool Lunchbox is paid up front, and you don't have in-app purchases.
No, right.
And then ChoreMonster is completely free and is ad-based.
Right.
So it's a really interesting dichotomy between the 3 of you.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, so Jim, for Monkey Preschool Lunchbox, when you guys initially launched, it was paid, right? Like, you haven't changed that model.
No.
How did you land on making that the way you were going to go forward?
Well, that was an easy decision then. I mean, that was 5 years ago. I mean, first of all, parents wouldn't want necessarily, I should say this. So I started off doing design in the .com boom. So I was part of an online greeting card company. It's called Blue Mountain. That was really huge. Yeah. And I was there when they went from being one of the biggest sites in the world to switching to a pay model, and 99% of the people left. So when you set that expectation up, you can't go back, especially in any kind of new media. So when we were doing this, we were doing other kind of work, and there's no way. First of all, you didn't do that with kids apps then. You could go in at 99 cents, but I wouldn't want to do that anyway. It's because there's the expectation of something being free already sets the environment. It's a different world now with app development, even for kids. I think that things have changed a lot, but for us, it's always been a pay model because basically our offering is a piece of software that a kid can play with. It's a game, and then that's it. It's a one-time purchase, and I think a lot of parents still really look for that. They don't need to do anything. There's no maintenance. They don't need to come back into it. Their kid isn't going to be pushing them, and they have to go in and say, well, learn about the app and figure out whether or not additional money is worth it. They have to then go in and figure out, they have to know the app as well as a parent does, and that can be kind of a high barrier for a parent.
Carly, do you want to talk about how you approached in-app purchases with Ubooly?
A lot of experimenting.
Yeah.
Originally, we actually sold to kids. We kind of took the old kid model, or the game model where, we sold coins. So there's a lot of games, and you could use coins and then earn them, or you could just pay to go get them. It was actually Apple that pushed us away from that. They don't like the idea of kids kind of being consumers in games. So then we changed it where now we sell educational packs to parents. And I was actually pretty surprised, our conversion rate. We were originally converting about 2% of our users to paying something in the app, and right now we're about 8%. And honestly, we're actually going to change our model again, where we are either you can just pay somewhere between about $20 to unlock all the content, or you can buy the toy and get it all for free. So that physical side allows us to do something a little different, because unfortunately we're just running to the roadblock of there's so many apps that are giving away stuff for free that I think that a lot of the kids creators right now are having to get pretty creative on revenue models. Yeah, all the investors and the VCs that invested in us, like love the idea of like, oh, they buy the toy and then they're going to be spending so much more on top of it. It's just, we got to a point where we just started banging our heads against the wall and said like, you know what, honestly, 8% is actually pretty good. And the expectations that people had was just unrealistic.
I actually think too, though, that like you were talking about is that it is kind of broadening a lot. And I think like the Endless Alphabet and Originator apps, they do a really good job of providing content that parents are involved with that they want to buy. They do a pay or a free, but then they have in-app purchases and it works. It's just really difficult to do it, to hit that right tone for the offering, and then also moving forward with the product and keeping it fresh. And
you're competing with a lot of like toy companies now that are like, if you look at the top 100 charts for kids now, like you're seeing a lot in that free category from Mattel now, Disney, Nickelodeon, Hasbro, and for them it's all about brand awareness. They're hoping that the kids will engage with the apps. They don't need to make any money on it.
Right, cycle.
So when you're competing with those guys in the App Store, you just have to you have to have a different strategy because you're not going to be able to like buy your way into the list anymore.
So, how do you approach being entertaining to kids while still providing educational value? Yeah. Where's you? Who asked the question? You? Yep.
That was a good question.
Oh, thank you.
Nice job, Alex.
Who wants to jump in on that one?
We pulled back a lot on the education, and then kind of started sneaking it back in, but not having it be linear was one thing. We just found that whenever we went linear, like almost like a classroom scenario, like when they're in their home and they're eating breakfast, playing with Ubooly, they're not in this mode of like just undivided attention. So we had to like set up everything in a way where it's like, well, maybe they're away from the device right now. Like just imagine that. So just taking out everything that's linear and then incorporating it more in experimental play. So activities that weren't intended to be educational, like cave exploring, we started adding little things in where it's like, oh, duck, those are stalactites, and we don't have to necessarily go through all the science of it, but now we're starting to get these ideas that there's these things hanging from the ceiling and we can come back to them later.
Yeah. You're kind of introducing the concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I consider us an educational app. I mean, we're covertly educational. It's not implicit. It's more.
I think you teach responsibility, right?
We teach responsibility. We teach counting and saving and the value of money, but all without really doing that. Where we take away all of the boring adultish things about teaching those things and present it in a way that just happens autonomously. It's not a forceful way. It's just like you're doing these things. You're changing your habit. You're learning how to be responsible and be helpful. Oh, and along the way, you're getting these points that you can then save and get something, or without calling it money or anything. So I mean, it's teaching without explicitly teaching, which works well because the kid doesn't like to be told they're being taught something. It's just shut down.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that, especially the apps we do, basically it's 2 to 8, but a lot of it is 2 to 5, and with the really young players and users, ABC kind of 1, 2, 3 shapes and colors was already kind of gameplay for them. Especially when they're young, there's a lot of just fun in that. They're gaining more power in their lives in the real world, and they're understanding things more. So what we do a lot of is we just sort of lean into that and make that sort of the core game design in a lot of the games we make, and then sort of just add to it. We don't really necessarily get in the way of it or try to hide it. I think that when you start, let's say, kindergarten, first grade, and kids start to become cynical, but also their daily lives are so busy. They get really busy. They have schoolwork already, right? So, but before that, in the time of preschool and things like that, it's really fun for them. They're getting a lot of reward from that. They get a lot of the feeling of success and accomplishment from learning how to spell cat. And so that's a lot there. So it's really not necessarily hard to make that gameplay for kids. But definitely the challenge it's a bright challenge for 7, 8, 9-year-olds. And you see that a lot with the apps in the App Store. They kind of lean into it also. The really successful ones, Motion Math or certain things like that. They do a really good job of making it, gamification is kind of a weird, it's kind of a bad word in some ways, but they do a really good job of making it play, but the core lesson. And so when you're in the under 5, it's kind of right there for you.
So going back to what we sort of touched on this, Carly touched on this earlier, but how do you all test the user experience of your apps? So you mentioned like watching kids actually engage with it, but how do you do that? How do you approach it? What else do you do?
So since we have the toy, we'll actually have video cameras that record, so we'll have them come in, they get a free toy out of it, and then we just let them play. And we also make sure that we do tests at our office, where we have kind of more of a controlled setup, and then also sending it out to people in their homes. And it's really important that the parent does not say to the kid, hey, we're testing this. It's like, hey, I got a new toy for you, or I got a new app, and then usertesting.com. And the one thing that was told to me...
What was the usertesting.com?
Yeah. I found that like some of the reviewers aren't that great, but some are really good. And going back to that whole thing of like how would a parent perceive the page, so like they'll actually read the listing sometimes and they'll say, oh, this sounds interesting, or I don't know about that, as they're going through it. So I found that's really helpful. And then the other thing that was just huge is not facilitating the play sessions, because when I do it, I just love what we built and I know the way I want the kids to play with it, and I just interfere all the time. And I've heard other founders and developers say the same thing, where they just they want to step in and touch the screen for the kid, and you need someone to go in there that doesn't really have a lot of knowledge, or like the parent.
Who is that?
Sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's like, we actually had a play therapist that was hosting a lot of things, so she was helping kids feel comfortable, but not making sure she wasn't stepping in unless the kids were like really frustrated, and it was just a horrible experience.
Yeah. It's new for us. Early on, we just didn't, mainly because we wanted to get something out and didn't have the luxury of waiting around for testing and feedback, especially when you're working with kids. It's a lot harder to get kid feedback just because parents are the gatekeeper and they're not usually keen on you testing something on their kid. But recently we started to implement, going into actual family homes or wherever our app will be used, or any product, wherever it's going to be used, that's where you test. So we went and observed families using it, and like you said, being there, and I'm like, just touch, it's right there, it's right there, it's right there, it's right there. They ignore it. You have to let them ignore it, because then you'll know
so
over time, if that happens all the time, that is a problem. That is a thing that needs to be fixed. So you have to keep your mouth shut and just watch someone stumble through your app, it's wonderful and horrible simultaneously, where you're learning really actual valuable feedback to know where your problem points are and your pleasure points are. And you're also bombarding yourself with how terrible you are, because everyone's having a problem with this. Why did I think this would work? But yeah, it's getting your product in front of the people where they're going to use it. We haven't done it with kids yet. We're still trying to figure out the best method for that, in terms of, if the parent is around, they're going to, again, be protective and guard on something that you really want a kid to immerse themselves in. But that's also the experience they'll have if you aren't there.
Yeah.
So,
So in these user testing sessions, have you ever found the way that they want to use your app surprises you, and that influenced things that you decided to do afterwards, design-wise?
Well, no, because I do pretty straightforward games, so we don't have much functionality beyond the lesson that they're learning. I mean, just to kind of touch on that previous part, we're a small company. It can be very expensive to do user testing the right way. Get really, you can hire somebody to do it cheaply, or you can do focus groups. But the getting the metrics and getting the data, and that also then needs to be vetted with your overall approach to how you're designing your product, even, right? Because these people are just blindly taking it and giving you the feedback. So for us, a lot of it is just getting in front of kids and watching them do it. And like you said, just sitting back and watching them do it. I mean, that's one great thing about digital, or I should say touch and mobile, is that there is only so many things they can do in the moment. So as far as the other part, like them using it in a different way, I think just also in game design, you do come across sometimes they'll occasionally, even though you might do this a lot and it doesn't happen as much, but occasionally they'll just come to it completely stuck on something that you had no idea they would. Yeah. So that can come up pretty quickly when you have kids playing your apps.
Sometimes something's really simple. Like we changed the intro is incredibly important for us. Like we spent the most time on the introduction for the kid, and I would probably recommend everyone spend a ton of time on like what that first minute will be. And we made this adjustment that we thought was so simple, and we didn't even think about it, and then did the testing. And essentially, if you have the toy, the new version of our app, that you can play with it in the toy or out. Like it uses the camera to detect when it's in. But we realized that Ubooly just started talking to you right away as an app. So people just never put it inside the toy because like they felt rude or they wanted to pay attention, and we just didn't think about it. So we just watched like 3 videos in a row, just watching these like this stuffed animal here in the app over here instead of putting it inside. And like Ubooly's telling them like, let's go on an adventure, and they're like taking the stuffed animal and bouncing it around. It was just like really weird. And I will say like the first 2 months of user testing, I watched the developers, and like literally they had like their hands, like their face in their hands, like they were just mortified. And the problems that the kids were experiencing were like things that I had brought up before, but seeing it in real, like in action is just, it does something to you where you like just realize like, oh, we can't just rely on our own sense of intuition.
Yeah, I guess what surprised me about our app was people hate reading. I just didn't realize there would be so much.
Kids hate reading, right?
No, adults hate reading. Like they just skip over everything that explained how the app worked, and they'd be in the app, they didn't know what to do. I'm like, it's because you just bypassed. Like we try to keep it to one sentence and everything. It was like whoop 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 whoop, whoop just like flying through, and they jump in. What do I do now? I'm like, well, you would have known, but of course you're watching and you can't say anything. So you're like, you're just shrugging your shoulders, going, yeah. And so that was one problem. One is I didn't realize how protective a parent would be with. We have a really strange app in terms of like it's not traditional in any sense because it requires a lot of education up front because it's not a matter of jumping in and knowing it. It's like you have kids and they have a chore and you're trying to incentivize them to do something and you have to add a reward for that incentive, and some parents had no desire to add a reward, which then we're like, well, then our app is not going to work because kids just not going to do something altruistically. Everyone believes they will, but they won't. And educating them on all of that, like why it's important, what the point values mean, why are there point values, if this kid's having a hard time with this thing, value it more, they'll maybe do it. And just so many things that we need to get across to a parent, but we don't have the time because we know that people are busy and don't want to read. Going through, like, I thought I had made that simple. Obviously did not make that nearly simple enough. And the process of reduction is very humbling because you always think things are so important and you realize, all right, that really was not as important as we thought. So it's important stuff, but it can be, you could spend a lot of hours on something and realize, no.
Yeah,
wasn't
the
worth
text
it.
thing was like a big one because we're like, we do need to show you how to do this. We added like a voiceover, and the guy's voice sounds really fancy. He's like British, so it seems important.
It is important.
He was in the movie or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, now he's been like, he's actually
Ian McKellen?
Yeah, like, I don't know. But like,
it's not Gandalf.
He's got this great voice. He kind of sounds like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy narrator.
Oh, yeah.
And for some reason, people like respect the voice, and so they just sit there and they listen to like each instruction with a slide. So that was like a quick fix.
I'll listen to anybody with a British accent. They'll just tell me whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it was clever, and I think that it surprised people. So the problem about the reading thing is like they're just used to it, right? They jump into an app and they're used to like the slides, and they just like swipe through them. So then when you kind of shock them initially, they're like, wait a minute, like that's not how most apps start off, where they like have this like epic voiceover at the beginning.
Stop.
So the next question I ask is like, it's a really fun question. I'm really looking forward to hearing your responses on it. But before we get to that, how did you identify, one, that you were going to have that commanding voice as your voiceover, and then two, where did you find the voiceover actor?
We found it through Voice123, and I think the idea came up of like getting ready to take off on a plane, which obviously doesn't make sense because no one pays attention to like the voiceover there.
Yeah, unless
yeah, we just knew that we needed something else that was going to get their attention. So yeah, but Voice123, I mean, we paid $300 for him.
That's what we use.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some things that you have seen in your normal life in kids' apps that are just completely wrong design-wise?
Oh, so many.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a lot, just in kids' media in general, but games, I think apps and games kind of the same thing. I think that a lot of times there's a lot of over-explanation for kids and instruction. That's a big hurdle for kids. Kids don't like to just sit around and be talked to. I think that also, as opposed to introduced to something else. Like there's like, yeah, I mean, throughout the course of an entire experience, they don't want to have to wait every time to have something explained. So you have to design for it to be sort of obvious or intuitive for a kid. And that can be something that's really reduced, actually. So that the other part is that overly abstract interfaces or interfaces that are just really complicated, over-designing or over-offering to sort of cover up that the core gameplay is not really that fun, like adding a bunch of bells and whistles. And these are easy pitfalls when you're designing something for kids because you want to make it fun and it's hard to get at because they sort of have this sort of much more narrow range of experience, so you have to kind of really pay attention to that. And a lot of times it's really hard, and so a lot of people will just sort of default to, well, I'll just add a bunch of instruction, or I'll just add a bunch of jokes, or things like that, but they don't really have to do with the main experience, so they become almost distracting.
Yeah, and I would piggyback on that being, I just find a lot of apps pander to kids. They do something because they think that's what kids like. It's like, this is just what kids like. They like primary colors because they can only see 3 colors. They can't see a rainbow. Right. And, everything has to be glossy and beveled and shadowed and noise. And it's like, and it just becomes a tradition that gets passed down because that's what kids see, then that's what kids do. I'm like, well, not necessarily. I mean,
right.
Make it, if it's good, it's good.
There's a lot of shorthand that people,
there's a lot of, like unwritten rules that.
Right, the kids want to see things that look like they were drawn by a kid, or that looks like a Baby Gap design bedroom. Like that's what they want, and they don't necessarily, they don't have expectations like that.
Like gimmicky fonts and typefaces. I'm like, why is that good for a kid? It's not good for adults. Right. Don't do it to anybody. And like a lot of it's just, like you said, like interface and all these things are just like, you're not really thinking about what a kid enjoys, which is, in my mind, exploration. Yeah. Give them the ability to explore because they're fearless. Adults, we're afraid. Don't put that on top of a kid like, I want to explain everything because you're afraid. I'm like, no, a kid's not afraid. They'll just touch and be like, oh, it does this. And do all you can to reward that.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. That kids don't really see themselves as being limited. They don't have experience or a lot of reference, so they want to, and they have an ego and they want to do things. Yeah. And so when they want to move into what the game you're developing or a property you're developing, their expectation is that they're going to be able to do well in it, and maybe they'll learn something from it. So while you always need to have hooks that allow them to move and be empowered and be able to experience the game, or it's important to realize that also though they can get stuck and they don't know necessarily that down the road something's going to happen or previously something happened that they need to be aware of. So that can be that happens in a lot of apps too, where there's a lot of sort of reference back to something that might have happened.
So I've got one more question, and I'm going to open it up for audience Q&A. What do you believe are some of the underserved segments in the kids app space, and so where are the new opportunities?
Definitely not entertainment. I think every kid app, it's hinged on entertaining a kid. Not that it's bad. It's just I know parents are looking for alternatives. We're in a really weird space, which is sort of like a kid's lifestyle app, which does not really exist. There's like no category for that. It's like it's a behavioral modification app, and there's not a whole lot of that happening. And not that there is a lot of room for it, but there's certainly room for, more rewarding apps that are not just about distracting a kid, but about, immersing them and educating them at the same time, and also helping empower them to be better little humans. And the technology can serve that really well, but we default to what's easy, which is show them a video and have them play a game, which it can do that without them realizing that you're also enriching them and challenging them and empowering them. So that's my view.
I think that the more based on like personalization, I'm not seeing a lot yet like change the actual app based on the kid. It's not easy by any means, but like the more you can find out about them and empower them to say like, this app knows about me and it's mine. It takes a little more work, but I think that that's interesting and kids really resonate with it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, actually. I think that kind of moving forward, if you kind of just mostly base it on the sort of evolution of kids and apps and devices, and parents are a big part of this. Once upon a time it was just about pass back, but now it is passed down, and then a lot of kids just actually might get a brand new device that's theirs, even young kids or say siblings. And then they're going to spend time in that device and the apps, and I think there is a huge opportunity to have a sort of subscription model for kids possibly, but more that it becomes part of really lifestyle stuff, and they are more invested in the games and the learning, and things like learning dashboards can really become utilized because the kids have their own device and they have their own apps, and they're customized for the kids. And they're all kid-facing, and the parents can interface to them in a sort of a more meaningful way as opposed to it just being straight random metrics they would get emailed, because a lot of that didn't really work. But I think moving forward, there can be a reapproach because, first of all, the screen time, sort of the sort of taboo of that has really been shattered a lot because parents are seeing a lot of utility. They're being dominated by their screens, so some of it bleeds down to their kids. And I think that there's going to be a real opportunity for there to be products that are sort of integrated into a kid's life in a way that is not necessarily, that's much better than just television, but has a lot of the sort of same sort of stickiness.
Oh.
Yeah, I was thinking, this is getting in my mind, I would love to see apps that graduate with kids. They're all so one-off, so super focused. It'd be awesome if it could, and knowing a kid, growing up with them and kind of staying with them. There's no, there's brand allegiance in a lot of physical products, but there's not a lot of brand allegiance in the digital world. Just because longevity does not exist, it would be really cool if people would approach it thinking with longevity, which is frightening because it's hard to, it's a lot of work, but it's doable.
Right.
The other thing that, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Is engaging grandparents and extended family members. So the thing that blew my mind was 40% of our customers for the physical product are grandparents. And we realized very quickly, holy crap, we need to address these guys. So adding some kind of co-play or communication layer, it's hard because of COPPA, but I think we're not giving grandparents enough credit. They are much more tech savvy, and they know that their grandchildren are already playing with mobile devices, but they just don't know how to engage. So if you can create an opportunity, I think there's some interesting things you can do there.
All right, audience, it's time for Q&A. So there's the microphone there. I'm assuming that's live. Okay, so walk up to the microphone, and then if you can, give us your name and where you're from.
I'm Robin Blumenstein. I'm from Palo Alto. My company is called Tubisoft LLC. We are developing a flight sim based on bees and how they affect the environment. I get really excited when I talk about this project because it's been something I've been dreaming of for years. I went to college because of this dream. So my question is, because it seems like you're focused on mobile applications, did any of you start in web development or online and then move over to the applications for mobile?
Paul?
Yeah, we did. We started on web because it was cheapest. It was just two of us, and I knew how to develop on the web, so we did that. There was a slight difference in terms of how you execution is quick on web. You do a change, and there it is. With mobile, obviously, it takes a lot more manpower. Although if you use things like PhoneGap or something, it's a little less. But, yeah, we started off web-based.
And I have one more question. Did any of you write grants for the education aspect of your games for STEM?
We looked into it, and we actually started, and it was just so much work, but I don't think it's a bad idea. I know a lot of folks that have gotten funding. One of my friends from Mod Robotics, physical product, but bootstrapped, got our first $1 million from the government on his initiative.
Wow.
You should. Yeah, you should.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shireen from Ace Education Apps, and we do spelling apps. So it's just little spelling lessons, spelling bees, and all of that. My question is, I'm about to release my second game in the App Store. And with the previous one, we had a light version, like the first 5 levels, and then the full version with all the levels. Is that a good way to go still, as far as the business plan goes?
So the question was, should you do a paid and a light version when you launch?
I don't have a lot of experience with that. I don't know a lot of developers that have, but having been in this space for a long time, I don't know that that actually works. And talking to people, I'm not really sure how successful that is to, if you're saying you're going to have 2 versions, one's a light version and then a paid version that's also in the store. Yep. There's not a lot of people who use that approach. Some people do the sort of the unlockable or the freemium or the one-time pay where you give a sort of a initial offering, and that can work. But there's not a lot of people who do that.
Yeah, because teachers, they do not want in-app purchases, and they do not want ads. So for me to monetize, I have either a light version and hope to convert, or I have to decide to do away with the light version and just have a paid version for $1.99 or something.
Yeah, that's what we ran into, because if you're not a known brand and you're charging for a download, a lot of people won't do it because they're like, I don't know who you are and I don't know why I should trust you, even reading reviews or whatever. And then the light version, like you're saying, is like you're giving someone the opportunity to sample it and hopefully convert. There are apps that do it, not always in the kid space. I know there's a lot of, they're not always viewed as highly as other apps, because I think a lot of people are, you're cheating, you're trying to,
Well, it's kind of a hard proposition. I mean, if your business model is I need to make money off of this app, then you do have a sort of a fish or cut bait kind of situation. I mean, if you wanted to sort of offer something that was a really strong product for free to build brand awareness about your app, build some sort of users, get word of mouth going, and then produce another app that wasn't necessarily the same app. In other words, instead of trying to double dip the app, I mean, you could maybe expand that way. That does happen. There have been people who've had success with that also, but it's really hard to sort of bubble up now. I mean, there's a lot of apps coming into the free space. There's a lot of apps, and there's people who do, not quite user acquisition in the kids' free space, but they're definitely they're doing there's a lot of strategies one can use with a free app to get a lot of downloads.
It also depends on what other people are doing in your market. Like if you're in a marketplace where everyone's offering it for free, you're not going to have any luck trying to offer it for a pay, which is unfortunate. That's the really downside, is if you get into a space like everyone's free, and I don't know how they're, they operate somehow. Maybe it's because they have a lot of other apps, which, that's also hard to compete with if you don't have the manpower. I mean, there's in-between models. There's like you get a version, but it's unlockable features, but then you have to figure out what features are valuable, value propositions for people to want to pay for. That's kind of the in-between where you're saying you can have the app, it will function for you, but if you want to do more things, pay. And again, have realistic conversion numbers. 2 to 8% is good. It sounds terrible. It sounds awful. Yeah. We had that, and we got rid of it because it sounded so bad to us, and we had VCs who were kind of like, that doesn't sound so good, because they want as much money they can get.
But it is good.
Were you happy with your first app? Like, do you feel like the first app was a success for you?
Well, it was just small, and I think my second app is much better. So, I have way more expectations for that one.
The first one was a free one or a paid one?
Both, free and paid. And my conversion was 2%. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Do you think you're going to be able to market to a lot of the people in the first app?
I think so, yeah.
That's good.
And another thing to think also is release in as many countries as possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
That will want to get the attention of Apple because they love that.
Right.
And it'll just expand your market. I mean, it's always good.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello. My name is Badia Damash. I work for PBS Kids, and I have a couple of questions. Like 4 of them. If nobody lines up behind me, it's fine.
We'll give you, you can do the first 2 for free, but if you want 4, there's an app.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm here to learn how to monetize. What do you think of the AR field, augmented reality for kids in the future or an upcoming future, or it's currently going right now. What's your thoughts on that?
Carly?
It's really interesting. I mean, we have a few friends that are in the AR space. I think it's tough because no one's really unlocked the gameplay long term.
Yeah.
I know that there's some pretty big players that were trying to do a lot, but like putting your screen up in front of your tabletop or whatever, like it's cool at first, but no one's really made it part of the entire world or experience. So I think that it's going to have to be rethought, and maybe it's not an iPad. Maybe it is once kids have a version of Google Glass or something really interesting on that end. Yeah.
It's a little bit of that cliche of a solution without a problem.
Yeah. People were doing it because they thought it was cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Technology before.
And Jim, I think you mentioned a purchase model when you go into free or paid. In our case, it's impossible to just stick to one.
Yeah.
One of our apps we release for free, and we get millions of downloads. We release another app for a different brand or different show that we charge for, like 99 cents or $1.99 or $2.99, or something coming up is like $5.99 that we're charging. It's a skill pack.
Right.
So, I mean, the expectations of parents in general, especially for PBS kids, they expect educational and free at the same time. But we try to sustain that mobile platform that we're going into. So, any thoughts on that?
Well, there's a lot of levers there, right? I mean, so if you have a really, really beloved brand like Daniel Tiger, right? Kids who like that really like it. Well, you have a lot of leverage on price and what's in the app. I mean, you can do a lot of different tasks. It doesn't even necessarily need to be educational. Elmo Calls is a perennial huge hit as far as just paid rankings go. It does very well. They have one of the first IAP kids apps, but also pay. And then you have some things that come, like you said, you can charge $5.99. It's unfortunate that you're never really sure, but I think that if you're aware of what the affinity that the kids will have and the parents will have for the product, and then is it sort of a premium brand? Is it really well known, or is it one that more avails itself to just being free? And then this goes into what's your goals? Like if it's just a pure revenue play, you aren't going to get much out of a free app, right? But if you're really trying, you say brand awareness is a really big thing. We really just want to. This is sort of not getting the attention it wants to in these other channels. We sort of want to evangelize it in the App Store. Then you do something that's pretty good for free and get it out there. So there's no one answer for any app. And really, there's an example of almost every approach in the kids category, especially.
One more.
It was a great idea about having apps or a brand grow up with kids. I gave it away.
He stole that one.
It's really hard. Like you just think about Daniel Tiger, or think of Arthur or Clifford. I mean, Arthur is still going till now, but he's still the same age. Any thoughts on that? I won't tell anybody about it.
Thoughts on how to do that?
Yeah, how do you age the characters while?
It's basically content more than literalness. I mean, you just approach them in a way that your market now. Like our market's 4 to 12. They couldn't be any more different, a 4-year-old and a 12-year-old. 4-year-old maybe can read, maybe. A 12-year-old definitely can. So so our app then would go from being very visually based, highly visually based, to one that's more verbal and has a different interface that it's attractive to preteens. I mean, it goes from there to however.
I mean, you could really if you could figure out a way to just take Harry Potter and make it into an app, right? I mean, it's like that is a story that grows up with kids. I think that you'd have to if character is an important thing, because like you said, I mean, kids really change and they respond to things. You'd have to sort of have the environment. It would have to be maybe a peer, something like this is getting a little bit.
I'm just seeing next week there's going to be a news article that's like PBS acquires Harry Potter, and we're going to be like, let's start it here.
Other way around.
I mean, it requires knowing the age of the kid too.
Thank you.
You have to gather that.
All right, one more question from the audience.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Fernando Montilla. I'm a developer based in Puerto Rico.
Awesome.
We just debuted a game app on the App Store last month. And my question has to do more with marketing and getting noticed. How many of you in the App Store are using iAd? And if you do, can you share some experiences on some of the results you're getting?
Yeah, you're going to be a good answer. I've had terrible experiences with iAd. I don't know about you, but
I've had great experiences with it.
Really?
Yeah, seriously.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I've never been able to get the cost per acquisition to a price where I was happy with it. Now I'm advertising to parents, so
As a
Yeah.
okay.
But
So
that's
I don't know.
not all we're
We can,
doing.
we can talk after this.
Yeah, we'll talk after this. But Facebook, installs has been
Yeah.
our best channel so far, and then also just other advertising channels where we just tell our story. So
Yeah.
content marketing through Outbrain has been really good. You get one blog post and then you re-promote it through Taboola and Outbrain and Enrelate. That's actually drove quite a bit of downloads for us, and for you guys, TV has.
Yeah, and then another thing that we've been using at ChoreMonster successfully is Twitter recently launched the ability to download from a tweet. So,
Yeah, I think as long as you're a very multi-pronged approach, you'll find what works best. But
yeah, you
have
don't
to
put
blanket it.
all of your eggs in one basket.
yeah,
you
you
have
do
to
a
be,
good blanket of coverage.
I noticed that the approach of doing your own selling is actually getting us more downloads than
Yeah.
actually paid advertising. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
we're a small development company with limited budget and everything, but
Yeah.
we make things happen. But I was just curious, whether going for paid marketing versus doing your own effort, works less well.
Well, I would say that part of that just is also too, if you're looking at it as just like a direct return on investment immediately. I think you guys do a different sort of thing because you're building your users up, right? So
Yeah.
you're looking at just that as the metric, is the users, the downloads.
yeah.
Yeah, we're looking not at downloads. We don't really care about downloads numbers, which is registrations.
Well, right.
Yeah.
We'll usually piggyback, like if we do paid, we'll piggyback on top of something. So if we get a press article, then we'll do paid. So then, because we'll know, we'll see our ranking might be in the top 150, and then we can pay a little bit more to juice it and get us in the top 50 or 20. And then we'll ride that for a little while. So that's typically, we'll do it in little burst campaigns.
Yeah, I've heard about doing peaks and valleys, just
Yeah.
striking all at once and then just tapering off.
Yeah,
and striking.
Because then if you can hit the charts, then you get a whole wave of downloads
Yeah.
from that, and that starts to make your media spend more efficient.
So I've got one last question for you guys, and it is, where do you see the industry of kids apps going in the next 5 years? Oculus Rift.
I don't think I would ever own one, but
Microchips.
Yeah, microchips. I think actually probably, if you had to look at one thing, you could look at sort of, I think, a little bit of what's happening with Netflix and sort of these channel opportunities, or sort of a more kind of holistic approach to offering content to kids. Something's going to have to eventually break with this individual app purchase world, where you're just going to have 8,000 apps on your phone. A lot of that's really broad, and a lot of that depends on basically how Apple wants to approach it, I think, really in the end,
They're
as
kind
far
of
as
the
just apps
gatekeepers of all that.
specifically, yeah.
That's the unfortunate thing.
Right.
Apple is such a gatekeeper, and none, you can't really predict what they might.
And right now, it
open up
seems
or not.
that actually consumers are okay with the way it is right now. They're purchasing apps, and they have their apps, and they have their devices are loaded up with the apps, and they're okay with that.
Yeah.
But I just imagine probably at some point it's going to become too much, because discoverability is going to be.
It's already bad.
It's bad. It's
Yeah.
always just traditionally bad, but then there's just going to be so many more, and
Saturation.
then there's going to be so many more big players sort of fighting just on the app level. That's something, and already those Cartoon Network, they're doing channel apps. So,
Although I think that it's going to be interesting to see for some of these big studios, because they're spending millions of dollars on these apps that are not making them money.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be interesting to see how long that goes for. They're making the money on adults, but not kids. So I'm hoping that eventually some president or VP is going to start saying hey guys, this is a losing proposition, and it will kind of the market will normalize and allow indie developers to kind of have more of a say, because it's terrible for indie developers right now.
Is it a losing proposition for them?
Yeah. For at least the guys that I've spoken with, I know a couple that are in the top 100 that were like doing really well. But like for the really big studios, it's about building a brand.
Yeah, they're trying to build a cycle. It's like we got the app, and you can watch the movie, and you can do this.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like to make wagers on where things are going to be in 5 years because it's possible.
We're going to look back on this moment right now.
I know that it's
I feel like
probably
that's wrong.
not going to
It's
be.
gonna be rough.
It's probably not going to be phone based. I don't know what it will be. Who knows what Apple Watch will do? That will change a lot of things and directions. Who knows what Oculus is going to do? In terms of kids, again, you have to go to what the parents are going to find cool, and then it's going to trickle down to the kids.
Yeah, I think that's probably it's going to be something maybe that comes from outside. It's going to come outside the App Store. It's going to drive it because there's going to be sort of a change in just general consumer behavior and expectation around technology, because everything is still completely fragmented.
Yeah.
So maybe things will come in a little bit tighter, and then apps will respond.
Great. So that's all we have. So join me again in thanking our panelists, Paul, Carly, and Jim.
Thanks, guys.
And thanks to all of you guys for attending.